Before we get started with our interview with Pam Arciero, we want to give you some updates from some of our past guests.
So on the most recent episode of Puppeteers, we had Mervyn Miller on, and he was talking about his book, Puppetry, and how to do it. You could get it at this link right here.
Yeah, be sure to check that out. And our good friend Derek Lux has been super busy with his show, Peter Pan. It's been selling out like crazy, and he's been posting a lot of really cool pictures on his Instagram and Facebook, so be sure to check that out.
And Adam, in a couple months, he's also going to be touring that show across the country, so they're not going to want to miss that either.
Oh, be sure to check it out.
Yeah, and our good friend Jean Marie Keevens has also been working on the riddle of the trilobites. She's in the process of getting some donations to make sure that production happens over in Flint, Michigan, and she's got some wonderful photos up. So if you click this link right here too, you could see some of those images and maybe help support the show.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube.
And we're on Stitcher, iTunes, and anywhere you get a podcast. So make sure that you subscribe and rate us there too. So yeah, I think, Adam, do you think it's time for the show?
Well, let's get started.
All right, here we are with Pam Arciero.
As puppeteers, we do tend to work alone. We do tend to create our little worlds with maybe one other person. So to have a group of people and have them really committed to what we're doing and really understanding, and then to have the lovely luxury of not worrying about your food and not worrying about where you're going to sleep and just doing puppets, it's really, that's the key for me.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. I'm your host, Adam Krutinger, and we have Cameron Garrity back again as a co-host.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
And today we have a very special guest. We finally have Pam Arciero. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Thank you. How lovely to be here. I love what you guys are doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's so good to have you here. And as someone who, I feel like you're one of my puppet fairy god people from the first moments of inviting me to Sesame Street to taking a lot of people under your wing at the O'Neill. It's such a pleasure to have gotten to know you over the years, and now to have this time to talk with you on the show. So thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So what are you up to right now? What are you kind of working on at the present?
At the present, I'm directing the puppet segments for a show called The Riddle of the Trilobites, and this is going to open in Flint, Michigan. And it's kind of it's a wonderful. Lee Sunday Evans is doing the overall directing of the show, and we're hoping it'll come back to New York and maybe do a little stint at BAM. It's excellent. It is kind of a musical about the history of the trilobites all way back then. I mean, it is for a younger audience. It's for school-age audiences, but it's beautifully written and beautifully sung. And then these great puppets. Amanda Villarobos made the puppets, and they're really unique looking and different. So it's lots of fun. Taking singers and actors and turning them into puppeteers has been a little challenging, but they've all risen to the challenge, and they're doing really well, actually. I'm very proud of them. I think it's going to be a good show.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah, we had Jean Marie on over the summer, and she was talking about the beginnings of that show and just the importance of doing it where you guys are performing. I mean, talk about being in the right place at the right time with the show in Flint. So how long are you going to be there actually in Michigan?
I'm not. I'm just directing it here in New York.
Oh, okay.
They're going to go there and load in. I mean, it costs a lot to bring people in that are, if I can do my work here and they don't have to pay for a hotel room and travel.
Oh, certainly.
That's how it's going to work with that. And a couple of the other things, like tomorrow I'm going in and we're doing the Sesame Street, what we call a satellite tour. So we go, and I'm assisting Rosita. So it'll be Rosita and Abby talking about our homelessness video. Homelessness video that we did a while back, and it's been getting a lot of traction. So I think it's getting released tomorrow or the next day. And a satellite tour is this very interesting thing we do where they're picking me up at 4:15 in the morning, and then we go to a studio, and you sit down and you have a blue screen behind you, and you sit with the puppets, and they bring people in from all over the country to ask us questions, on the morning shows. Mm-hmm. So they'll be there, this is Atlanta. And so you're talking to somebody in Atlanta, and they ask you a few questions and you talk about it. And then, okay, you're clear. And then 3 minutes later, you're talking to, North Dakota, 3 minutes later. So it's called a satellite tour because you go all around the country. And it's we start at 6 a.m. We end usually at 11 or 12, and it is exhausting. Actually.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, it must be all or mostly all the same questions to a certain degree too.
Similar
So
questions. Yeah, they send out the questions to people to sort of be prepped on what to ask, but they always ask, someone always asks some weirdo question, and you're sort of sitting there going, what? How am I supposed to answer that? I'm not doing any answering tomorrow, so I'm cool. Along for the ride, which is great.
You just get to whisper into Carmen's ears all the things that you
Yes, right.
wish that the characters could say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then what else am I doing? I don't know. I seem to be doing a lot of stuff. Well, the O'Neill, we're running up the O'Neill. So I just finally sort of have all our ducks in a row. I really wanted Marty Robinson and Tim Lagasse to do their video workshop, but they've gotten another job and they can't do it. So our pre-conference is a little different this year. It's just Alice. Oh, I'm going to forget. It's Alice and Hansel Jung, who's teaching writing. She just produced a puppet play out in Portland, written, and she'll be working with Lexi Luther, our what is it called? She's our resident dramaturg for the conference, but she is the head of the literary department at the O'Neill. And then we have Alice. We have
That Jim Krupa guy.
Oh, him. I knew I forgot. You're right. It's Jim Krupa. I haven't talked to him in a couple of weeks or months, actually. So I kind of forget about him. No, not ever. One never forgets Jim Krupa.
No, not on Puppeteers, especially.
Yeah. And he'll do his 15 to 18 people in the class. And so it fills up quickly. And then Alice does that fantastic materials and movement class that is just, she picks up a feather and makes it talk and dance and sing. And you just go, how did you do that? Yeah. The air makes it do it, not me. And you go, okay, Alice, got it. She's brilliant. She's just brilliant.
And this is obviously we've talked to a lot of people who've come through the O'Neill, so regular listeners will certainly know what you're talking about. But this is the first time them meeting you, and you are the artistic director for the Puppetry Conference.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that.
Yeah.
And then going on to the main conference.
Well, let me add a little note that nobody knows yet because we haven't quite solidified it. But there is going to be an artist in residence. Sarah Nolan is going to be the director. And this is for an UNIMA project that is a world project. And what it is the UNIMA Congress decided to support a young puppet playwright. And they will produce a play that's going to be in 4 different quadrants of the world. Same play, produced by different directors all over the world. And so Sarah Nolan is going to direct it for the 3 Americas, which is North America, South America, and Latin America. She's going to be directing it there at the O'Neill during the pre-conference. That's going to be their time to put the show together. So that's pretty exciting. It will be at the UNIMA Congress next year in May 2020 in Bali, Indonesia. Wow. So that's incredible. Yeah, so that's going to be quite fun and exciting.
Yeah. Now, is she working with any of the people from the Puppet Showplace Theater? Where she
we don't know who her cast is yet. We haven't cast it. So we're looking into the casting process. I'm going to be going. It's been the Casteliers Festival in Montreal in the first week in March. We're having meetings about it, and how it's all going to come down is going to be determined then. So it's pretty exciting to have that project move forward.
That's cool. Are any of these productions going to share notes at all and try to make things similar? Or is the goal to make them different?
The goal is to see how they're interpreted, right? Is the same script, different languages too, don't forget. They're not all going to be in English.
Yeah.
So some of them are, I think that's, there's an African contingency. I don't know what language they'll choose. They may all end up being in English just because you're pulling people from different countries. And I have to say, with all the traveling I've done of late, the one language that everybody kind of knows is English. I just flew 18 hours back from Taiwan, and it was very funny because even though the flight attendant was speaking English, I had no idea what she was saying. It was like, what? What? And this is over the loudspeaker, so I was getting a little nervous, but it was.
Oh my gosh.
But they kind of, most most countries kind of speak a little English, you know, I mean, because it is the language of computers and the language of science and math. So that's kind of, I think, the reason it's not just our white imperialist attitudes, but I think that's the reason why English is really sort of the supernumerary of language these days.
Well, that's really going to be exciting to watch how those all progress, certainly.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if like one day after they're all workshopped and everything, if they all came to a conference and had like all the performances at one conference, like that would be really cool.
And we
see
could
them all.
They're only 12 to 15 minute performances. The script is only 12 to 15 minutes, so that it could fit into an hour, which would be very interesting.
Yeah, that'd
be awesome. You can help me find the money to do that one.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
The Kickstarter's already live.
That's right. We'll have a GoFundMe. We'll promote it, and yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That would be awesome.
We'd be happy to support it too. So
yeah.
The main conference.
The main conference is very exciting this year. We're trying to keep the conference limited to 50 participants because we've gone as high as 75 and it just becomes unwieldy. And there's too many lines are too long in the cafeteria. You know, all that the housekeeping problems just get too big for us to handle. So we're trying to keep it around 50. So this year we have 3 guest artists. We have Tracy Broyles, who's this amazing director, thinker, community-oriented. She was the artistic director of Spiral Q, which is a community-oriented puppet company in Philadelphia, I believe. And she is doing this very interesting project where her thing is that, you know how you go to a street fair or a market and they'll have tents and you go into each one and they're selling different things. So she wants to have a series of tents that have puppet shows in them that are talking about different social issues. So each tent you go into describes another social issue and how to deal with it and how to resolve it. So it'll be very interesting. I think we're going to put the tents outside of the theater. So as you walk up to the theater, there'll be a series of these tents that you go into to see each little show that's going to be created by the participants. So I'm very excited about that one. And then we have Dan Hurlin, who actually has never had much of a relationship with the O'Neill. We've kind of talked to him and tried to get him back and forth. And now that he teaches up at Sarah Lawrence, he doesn't get to do much of his own stuff, right? When you become like me at the O'Neill, I don't do much of my own stuff because there's no time. You're trying to run everything. You're trying to make sure everybody gets what they need. So he's been doing that at Sarah Lawrence. So he's very excited to develop a new project with the participants there at the O'Neill. And his visuals are so stunning, the way he designs things. And I'm not sure if he's going to bring already built puppets or they will be building there. He hasn't, I don't know where those lines have fallen. And one of the things I try to do at the O'Neill anyway is I want the artists to come and do what they want to do, what they need to create, and the participants to learn how the artist creates. That's the whole point of the O'Neill for me, is that you learn the style and the techniques that this particular artist does. And then you also sort of learn how their minds work and how they get to those points. And, you know, how do you create something from nothing? And so Dan's really going to work on that with the group. And I think that's fantastic. And then we have Polina Borisova, and she is this wonderful performer, object performer. She does some mask work. She does all kinds of interesting object theater. She is Russian born, lives in France and works in France. And she's worked with a lot with Yael Razuli as well. So there's sort of a similar standard in ilk. And I think that's going to be quite fun to see where that all comes from. Her shows are amazing, Polina's shows. So when I see an amazing performer, I think, wonder if they could teach that at the O'Neill and we could go a little further on in the business, you know. That's really what it's about. And so that's our main guys. And then we'll have our music component with Melissa Dunphy as usual. We have our resident artists who've been working with our emerging artists. And the emerging artist strand is again led by Darren Wood and Richard Termini. Jane Martineau, who's always run the resident company, usually will not be able to be there. So we have Bobby Nizgorski coming back. And Bobby was one of the founders of the O'Neill. And she's been so busy with her regular life, she hasn't been able to do it the last few years. So she's going to be director of the resident company, which we're very excited about. Jean Marie Keevens is not going to be able to be there in person. She's got another job as well. So she does all the run up to the O'Neill with me, all the planning, all that stuff. But for the participant projects, James Godwin will be directing that this year, which is a little bit of a change for us. But it'll be wonderful. And Amanda Boschenagel, who's been helping me for the last 3 years, is going to fill in for Jean Marie for the nuts and bolts of all the stuff that we do. So it's an interesting year. Have I forgotten anybody? Well, Jim Rose and Alice Goschak is going to do marionettes as usual. Kurt Hunter will be there to help Jim Rose. And then our lovely, lovely shop stewards, John Little and Ulysses Jones will be there. And our volunteers, Tom Carriola, Sharon Lerner, and Calvin Tamura will also be there. So it's kind of the usual crowd.
Yeah.
We are not having a writing strand within the context of the conference this year because with 3 guest artists and the limit of 50, each guest artist wants 8 to 10. That's 30 people right there. And then you have a couple of musicians and you have your couple, 2, 3 emerging artists and resident company, and we're at 50. So it's kind of hard. I had to choose between having my 3 guest artists and some other strands. And so that's kind of how it's fallen out.
Well, I mean, despite those logistical challenges, I mean, every year you are able to deliver such a wonderful cohort of new folks and of some of the returning people. So it's just always such a treat to go there and see who you've assembled. We were just talking with Mervyn Miller yesterday.
You were?
Yeah.
Did you want to do with him?
What's that?
Did you do a Puppeteers with?
We did.
Mervyn?
Yeah, and it's going to come out on Wednesday.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
People listening, they came out 2 weeks ago. So
Right. But yeah. So but another example of someone who is just you don't always get to meet people like that, and but you do at the O'Neill. So
Well, and one of my missions at the O'Neill is to bring the international component in. Because I think in America, we tend to think, oh, yeah, we know what's happening with puppetry. And if you go anywhere else in the world, it's so incredibly different.
Yes.
And I mean, the structure is different because in Europe and other countries, puppeteers are literally supported by this government and given money to be puppeteers. Imagine that. In America, we have no idea what that would be like. You're lucky if you get a grant maybe to do a show that has to have a strong educational component. In Europe, you get grants just to make art. So if it's not educational, who cares? It's about what your message is, what you want to say, what you want to do. And so I do like to bring Europeans in, or other nationals in to work with us, including Canadians. I mean, they're sort of okay.
Yeah.
I adore Ronnie Burkett, and the interview with Ronnie is fantastic. If you haven't seen the Ronnie thing, go see it. Wonderful.
You trapped him a couple years ago, and now he got the bug.
Yeah, he couldn't be there this year. It's sort of hard, but it's hard to think of doing it without Ronnie. But
right,
we will.
He'll be back. Well, so that's a great sort of sense of what you're doing right now. But we'd love to go back to sort of your roots and talk about how did puppetry kind of happen for you? How long has it been a part, or when did that first happen? We heard one story that you were at UConn to training to be a dancer and you broke your foot, but I'm not sure if it something.
Not UConn, first in Hawaii. I was thinking about the date, which is late 70s. Okay, I came to UConn in 78. So it would have been about 76, I would say. I was getting my dance degree. I do have an undergraduate degree in dance and drama. And I injured my knee, and it had to be in a cast. And so I started creating all these dances for one leg, right? Because I could stand on the cast, but I couldn't really dance with it. So I did these funny, weird dances. And there were a couple of women there, Anna Vigiano and Mary Olson, who said, "You're really funny, because this is really a weird thing to do in choreography class, right?" And they said, "We have this puppet company. We need a puppeteer. Do you want to do that?" I said, "I don't know anything about puppetry." And they said, "No, you'll be okay." And besides that, this summer, Kermit Love, the man who built Big Bird, is coming to teach at the University of Hawaii a puppetry course. So why don't you take it? And I'm like, well, okay. So I went in. I volunteered and did a few days with them, just kind of helping out with the puppet shows. And then Kermit came. And Kermit Love is this amazing, amazing, wonderful person. Not easy. I don't know any artist who's easy, and he was not an easy person, but inspiring and great. And he taught us about art and puppetry and how you say what you need to say with a puppet and how movement is so vital to what's going on. And, you know, if you can say it without saying any words, then do that. And he talked about how he, you know, he was also a costumer for all those years. And he put the first fruit hat on Carmen Miranda, as well as the big shoes. I mean, he did all this famous stuff. You know, he dressed everybody. He did rodeo, you know, with DeMille all those years ago. So here was this really famous weird old guy, looked just like Santa Claus, long white beard, long white hair. And he was only then, I think, in his early 60s, but he looked like a million years old, you know? So you were like, yes, sir. Yes. Oh God, it's the genius is telling us what to do. And he was a genius in so many ways. And it was so inspiring. And then I was in my senior year, I think, of dance. So I was finishing my degree. I had to do one more semester because of the break in my knee. And then I said, well, he said, why don't you go to puppet school? So I started looking around. He said, come to New York is actually what he said, but I was scared. Because, you know, it's like, I'm a little Hawaiian girl. What the hell do I know? Go to New York? Are you kidding? I'm scared. So, and also I wanted to finish higher degree in case when I got to this age that I am now, I could teach, which I am doing. So I went ahead and applied to University of Connecticut and to UCLA, which at that point did have a puppetry program, but it was all basically Asian in orientation. It was like, you know, Wayang Kulit and Wayang Golek and all those, the Wayang, they were big into the Asian style. And I had studied that quite a bit at the University of Hawaii, actually. As I continued to stay there and work, I got hooked into their dramatic arts department, and the puppetry department there was quite good. And we had a Wayang teacher who had studied in Indonesia for many years. And we had Tammy Hunt was there, who did a lot of children's theater, and her emphasis was children's theater and performance with puppets. And then I had a wonderful group of puppeteers there, huge group of puppeteers. So I finished up there, applied to graduate school after that. Actually, Kermit came back one more time before I left. And I came back to graduate school and went to University of Connecticut to get my graduate degree in puppetry there. I studied with Frank Ballard, which was an interesting process. He had a different view of what puppets was about. And he was very much a marionette person. He taught all the forms, but his love was marionettes. And I was a Muppet person. Some of us are, you know, right. That we learn more about what there is. This is what we've seen. This is what we know. This is what we do. I love it. I still do it, right? But I love the other forms a lot now, too. When I was going back to for the summer, I would go home to Hawaii for the summers at graduate school. And so then I got them to hire Nikki Tilrow to come and teach at the University of Hawaii. And so then I had her, actually, she stayed at my family's house. And, you know, I took puppets with it. My boyfriend, now my husband, actually came along, who was, he's a marriage and family therapist. I wanted to say psychiatrist, but he's not really. Psychologist. He's a marriage and family therapist. So he was studying therapy, but he came along with me to the University of Hawaii and actually performed in Nikki's show, which was a big deal for us. It was like, really? You're gonna perform? Big step out for him, but it was very fun. And then when I came back, I finished my degree, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I wanted to audition for the Muppets. So I just hung out. And before I quite finished my degree, they had an open call. And I went, and that's where I met Marty Robinson. We auditioned together. And they were really only looking for snuffleupagus. They weren't looking for women at that time because they had none. But they had Fran Brill, who would show up like for inserts for once a week. For like 2 or 3 days for the whole year. That's what she did. She just did specialty insert things at that time. But, you know, So I was not called that time. 2 years later, after I graduated completely, I got a show. I graduated, I got a show called The Great Space Coaster. I had auditioned for and got to be, they were putting in some new characters called the Huggles. And Great Space Coaster was myself and Kevin Clash and Jim Martin. And then Frank Kane did did Baxter. And I think Noel McNeil came in at that time as well, because they were replacing some of the other, John Lovelady had left the show. He had done Knock Knock the Female Bird. So I went into that, and it was like so much fun. Three weeks was all we shot to do 36 shows, and you know the quality was great.
Yeah.
It was really set them up, knock them down, keep it moving. And
36 shows in 3 weeks?
Correct.
Oh my
Holy cow.
wow.
And it was one of those serial shows, you know what I mean? It was for, it was done for Hasbro. In those days, you had a syndicated show, and all they were doing it was for, they would give it for free to the TV stations if they gave them the commercial spots. So you do the show, and then they would put their commercials in, and that whole package would be sent to the syndicated station. So for a half an hour, they would, or 20, you know, they got 8 minutes of free commercials if they produced this half an hour show. And that's how it worked.
Wow.
Okay.
So,
is that a model places still use it all? It can't be.
I don't know.
That's interesting. I never even thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally what we did. We were doing the show for commercials for GI Joes to be showed in between.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
But we had to do them fast and get them out there, because they didn't want to spend a lot of money doing this. This was their cheap way of getting commercials out there.
Right.
And I remember the director named Dick Feldman, I believe it was. And I didn't meet him till the last day of the shoot, because he never came down on the floor. He would just lean in and go, faster and funnier, please. That's all you would hear from Dick on the floor.
Wow.
Amazing.
Now, going back to when you were first meeting Kermit, just because didn't want to jump over that too quickly, but as a dancer, was that something you responded to, of him saying, you know, we're going to talk we're going to use these puppets to communicate non-verbally? Was that something that sort of changed, or what was it about him, besides being a magical Santa Claus man?
Well, visually he was spectacular. He had an eye like you couldn't believe. He could talk to you about all kinds of art, and how both visual art and ballet would play into this art form that we were working on. He knew dance really well, so he kind of spoke my language all the time. You know, I'd spent 18 years dancing, mostly ballet. So when he spoke to me, I understood what he meant. And I think that puppetry is a very odd art form, in that it really does use movement, language, and visual so well. I mean, everything does, but this is so specifically honed down, you know. And the instrument you use is the puppet, but you really do need that score, which is the acting and the music, and you need you know, to do the movement and the performance to make that believable. That is what Kermit was really spectacular about, talking about intellectually how to get that. And he didn't, even if he didn't know exactly how you were supposed to do it, he would tell you, you need to make sure this movement looks like this, and then leave you to figure it out. So that gives you a really strong sense. I mean, it's interesting, because when I'm directing this trilobites thing, I think about that all the time. I don't tell you how to make that puppet move. I tell you what I want it to do and what I think you should try. And then they try and figure it out on their own. And I just feel like you remember that more than it's me putting that movement onto you. But he just was the most inspiring person when it came to talking about puppetry, about the history of it being such a big deal, and the way it looks, and is so important to how your audience responds, and the movement, and then the acting is huge on top of that. You know, it is always the thing we say, doing a puppet, you take everything an actor does, but you do it from here to here. You know what I mean? You consolidate everything, all of that acting, the singing, the movement, the dancing, and you do it from your elbow to your fingertips.
Right.
It is such a different process. And also freeing, you know, I mean, it is that old thing about when you go to acting school, they say, okay, for me right now, you can play grandmas and maybe great grandmas, but that's it. You know, that's what I would get if I was out there acting. As a puppeteer, I can play anything.
Yeah.
And that is such a freeing quality. And that's what Kermit also said. He said, you know, he would cast me as a boy, which would be very hard for me to be cast as a boy, as a human, you know, but I could be the boy character walking through whatever event that was going on. So
did you end up working with him later on or crossing paths? Did he know how deep into it you?
I came to New York. I was going to University of Connecticut. I would come down on the weekends and hang, or when I had time off, and go to his studio and watch him building puppets. He put me in a few things. I think it was Wise potato chip commercials. I got a few commercials with him. And then when it came to Sesame, he was on Sesame Street working with them all the time. So he kind of would shepherd me in and I would watch. A lot of my training for Sesame Street was spent probably 1.5 years to 2 years of just watching, standing on the sidelines, watching how they do it, what goes on, every single movement, every camera move, how that works, and you know how the puppet is focused, what they're doing to repair everything. I just watched and watched and watched every chance I got. And then so when it came time to actually audition, it was kind of, I was comfortable with what was happening with that.
That's
And
so
I
cool.
knew, you know, I knew a lot of the people by then. I knew Richard really well, and Richard Hunt, Barry Nelson.
So he didn't just inspire you; he kind of got you started too.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
He
Gave you everything, but probably a W-2, right?
Right, exactly.
that's what Krupa told us, right?
Yeah, well, Krupa was hired by him, and Krupa actually came to Hawaii. You know, that's where we met. He came with Kermit
Oh, okay.
at the University of Hawaii. And we did a show together back there. I think it was 78. We did a show. So Krupa and I are friends for like 40 years, which is so shocking. So we're not that old. How can that be? But yeah, he brought Krupa, and Krupa was like, you know, Krupa always has these stories about, you're not going to pay you, I'm not going to pay, that Kermit didn't pay him. But I had this wonderful thing where I was always hired by the people that Kermit was working for. So I always got all my paychecks, and they always paid me, you know. And as a performer, by that time, I was already part of the union. In fact, Space Coaster bought my union card for me, which was the thing they would do. They wanted you, they'd hire you, they'd buy your union card, which then was only about $700. I understand it's about $3,000 now.
Yeah, that's something like that.
No.
Yeah.
Do you by any chance have a little like a goofy memory of Kermit? Because because Krupa gave us some interesting ones. I was wondering if anything stuck out, because Krupa explained him as such a character.
He was a character. He was very much larger than life and a little wacky. He had this English accent, and then you found out that he grew up in New Jersey. Very hard to figure that out. Now, he did spend a number of years in London working. He did spend 10 years or something in London. But still, you grew up in New Jersey.
That doesn't wear off.
I never heard him do a Jersey accent.
Yeah.
And gosh, lots of funny things. You know, he could walk very quickly. He was very sprightly and spry, and swore that the subway stairs had kept him healthy and young his whole life. And then, of course, his story about the fact his hair turned white when he was in his 40s. And the reason why was supposedly he was in a car accident, and it scared him so much that all of his hair turned white. It's just very funny. But the other thing he would do now, he was a very, active, strong guy. And we'd be standing in line at a supermarket or something, trying to get something done. And all of a sudden he'd go, "Honey, my legs are hurting. Do you think we can get this person to let us go to the front of the line?" He'd go, "Okay, Kermit, let's go to the front of the line." Because he just didn't want to wait in line. Totally healthy, not a problem, but he would pull that act.
Yeah. That's great.
That's the kind of person he was.
Flaunt it if you got it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And everyone would buy it. For God's sakes, it's Santa Claus saying he doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Too.
So you get hired at Sesame Street at the same time that Kevin Clash was hired as
Yes.
well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the two of us.
And were you brought on to take over the role of Grundgetta and all the sort of the
Kind of,
people
we
that
worked as
Brian
Brian
Neal was?
leading.
Yeah.
Yes, Brian left, and about 5 of us took over his roles. It was
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Brian was sort of doing everything at the time. They did want a female in the group, so they were looking for that. That, I think, is the other reason I was brought on. And Kevin was brought on. Actually, he wasn't really, Elmo was such a minor character at that time that he wasn't really even brought on to do Elmo. He wasn't given that. He got Nobel Prize, and then Kevin and I did a couple characters called Crystal and Mario. They were trying to do this boy and girl best friend thing that didn't quite work out, obviously. And Kevin was brought on to do a number of things, and he had actually worked previously, a year or a season or two with Sesame, a few years before that. And we had been on Space Coaster, so we already had a great relationship going at that point. And so they hired us together, and we came in, and we, at that time, we did 110 shows a season, which is a lot of shows.
Well, did that take 4 weeks for that one?
Yeah, right. It was 4 whole weeks. No, we took about almost 6 months. We did September to January or February. And so it was really, as a contract player, which I wasn't the first year, but every year after I was, you were there 5 days a week. It was really, you get up in the morning, you go down to, we were at 9th and 55th at the time, and we'd go in and you just work the job all day, and then you'd go home. And we did lots and lots of, there was a billion different characters and background, and which we don't have a lot of anymore. When this year, I think we did 38 shows, 36 shows. And my favorite story about that is, we did 110, probably for five or 6 years while I was there. I started season 15. So we did 110, and then they came in and said, no, we're going to do 90. So then we did 90 for a long time. And then they went down to 50, and we were doing 50. Now, this is affecting both your income and the amount of time you're working, of course.
Sure.
And so we were down to 50. And then apparently, and this was told to me by Lou Berger, one of the writers, the head writer at the time, they came in and they said, nope, we're doing 25. We're cutting it in half. The bean counters come in. You're going to cut it in half. That's all there is to it. We're doing 25 shows. And Lou apparently was writing this all down, and he casually looks up and says, 25, you're sure? He says, absolutely, 25. Nothing more than 25. And he goes, so which letter of the alphabet do I have to fire? So after that time, we did 26 shows.
26.
Time. And pretty much that, I think, is the lowest number we've ever done, is 26.
Mm-hmm.
We do tend to do at least one show for each letter of the alphabet.
Yeah.
Although not so much anymore, it's sort of varied. But, that was a big jump from 110 to 26 shows over, well, it was over about 20 years. But it became a different beast. TV changed, TV's changing. Show tastes are changing. There was more competition. When we were doing 110 shows, there was really nothing else on. So it was necessary. They needed that. And, we hadn't gotten Barneyized. Barney did this thing where you could play the same show for 5 days straight, and kids liked it. And there was a certain thing about that, because they know the song. By the second day, they know half of the song. By the third day, whatever song you're singing, they know the whole song. And they do kind of like that. So suddenly people are saying, well, why do we need 110 shows then? We can play the same show every week. We only need, 20 shows to do that. So that began the demise of the number of shows that we did, and the variety of shows, right? Suddenly we don't have to, they're working on this idea that you can do reruns forever for kids and it's fine. No, I don't think that's true, but it does work to some extent. I don't think it's good for them, but.
Yeah. Now, certainly as someone who's been there for all that time and you've kind of seen it, you've had some characters that have become, part of your cast, but you often spend time as either, as you mentioned, either right-handing or as a support character in the
Mhm.
backgrounds, AMs, things like that. So what kind of perspectives does that give you as you're on set as a puppeteer with these other folks? Because I imagine that kind of gives you a special kind of outside eye. Like you're one of the puppeteers, but you can also kind of
Yeah,
observe things in a different way than if you were performing Elmo or Big Bird
right.
or whoever.
There's a certain freedom I have that other puppeteers don't have, in that some days I can just, I'll just glance over a script and I know what I have to do. I'm not spending a lot of time memorizing or fretting over, how the show is being driven. And that's kind of wonderful. Sometimes it's boring in that way. I would rather be working on a character, motivating and moving forward. But it also does allow me to see different people's techniques. There are some people, they're different styles. It allows me to actually be able to mimic a lot of them. Like I know that Grover would do this and Elmo would do that, and neither one, there's no way that move, that Grover move Elmo would do. So you do kind of get an eye for that. And it also, in a directorial way, you get to see, as puppeteers on a TV show, you're constantly directing the frame. You're constantly looking at how this is in the frame here and this is over here. I'm here, so I better keep alive, but not too much because I'm going to distract over here. So you are constantly helping the director or directing yourself in the scene. So from that standpoint, I get a lot of, I've had a lot of experience watching and that process of directing and understanding what's going on with that. And there's all the funny, weird ego stuff that goes on too, right? So there's people who go a little crazy under the pressure, and you can just sort of sit back and go, all right, calm down. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Because there are pressures that come. It's a wonderful job. It's a great thing to do, but it's a lot of pressure sometimes, to make sure that the show is good and that the scene is going the way it should be going and that your character is who the character is supposed to be. Because sometimes writers come in and hand you a script that's totally wrong for the character.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that it's your character, what your understanding of the character is. And we've always said that we're the last bastion before of maintaining the character who they are. Writers and producers have different ideas of who they are, but who they really are is who they reside in, us. So that's our job, is to make sure that these characters are true to who the character is. And Jerry Nelson was very big on maintaining that.
Can you describe a situation where maybe something had to be changed, or has something ever gotten so far to where it had to be changed on set like that? Something kind of dramatic? Because of it not being to the character?
Yeah, we change stuff on set a lot. It's not that dramatic to make that change. It's kind of like, Oscar would never say that. There's just no way that Oscar would say that. Yeah. Oscar would never Oscar would hoard this thing and he might share it with someone, but he'd never, give it away to the trash man. That kind of stuff where you are trying to control. Grundgetta is really mad at Oscar, but she would never yell at him that way. Yeah. That kind of things. And the head writer's pretty much always on set. So you can say, I really have a problem with this. Can we talk about how we change it? So it's not that dramatic. And most shows are evolving things, right? As you go, the script comes in and it needs a tweak here and a tweak there and a movement here. And sometimes we drive the wranglers crazy because we'll ask for something off the top of our head and they don't have it, and they try their best. They're so wonderful. They try their best to give you what you need,
So is that actually part of the process or the plan, or do they try to do a little bit of back and forth in the writing before that process?
Well, we never used to, but the last few years, I guess the last 4 years, they started to have table reads ahead of time where that is established, and trying to figure out what needs to be taken care of before we hit the floor. Nice. In the early years, when you're doing 110 shows, there's no time for that, right?
Yeah, right.
You just come in every day and you make sure you know your script and you go forward from that. And sometimes it's better that way and sometimes it's not. There's accidents that happen that are lovely, And sometimes you get to keep them, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But they're pretty good about understanding, that the back and forth happens, the changes happen in the script, and then the script hits the floor, and there's still changes that are going to happen.
I was gonna say, you can go back and forth forever. At some point, you just got to put it on its feet. Yeah.
You do. And then once you're there, there is the time pressure. It's expensive to run a studio. There's a lot of people standing around watching you. You don't want to take too much time to develop a minute point that maybe doesn't matter. You're trying to keep conscious of staying true to your character, doing your best performance, and not taking too long if possible.
Yeah.
It is an interesting process.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Now, I know you've directed certainly other television puppetry and things. Have you ever directed for the Sesame Street program proper?
No, not proper. I've done some other minor things. I actually am. I'm angling towards it. I may do that. I don't know. It depends how the season goes. And I've been in conversation with them, and I do what we call shadow directors. Like if there's a couple of directors who I adore, so I'll just go with them the whole day and follow the script and see what they do. And it's a way of learning how to do it exactly like they do. It is a complicated process,
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. And then there's so you mentioned being able to understand the different ways the characters move and such. Are there probably instances where you have to double for characters for like if?
Oh yeah, we do stand-in all the time.
Yeah.
There are people who have multiple characters, and therefore they can't do both characters in one scene. For instance, Matt Vogel is Big Bird and the Count. So if you have a scene with Big Bird and the Count, someone has to be either doing Big Bird or doing the Count. So
Right.
That happens a fair amount, actually, especially with Eric Jacobson. Does so many. He does Bert, and he does Grover, and he does Oscar, and he does, he just does such a wide range that very often it is Eric's characters who are being played by other people, but Eric voicing it. And sometimes he'll voice it live as we go, depending how complicated the script is. So he's talking to himself for 2 or 3 pages. And sometimes they'll pre-record it, depending on how that, how the scene is going.
Yeah.
And pre-recording is never really an optimum choice. Doesn't have the freshness. Recorded never has the life that, because people say to me, "Oh, don't you record it all and then you just go and wiggle the puppets?" And I'm like, no,
Oh, God.
not in a good show.
Oh, geez.
So for people who might be working on developing their own content or putting out shows that they're working on, a lot of times they're going to have to their first job is to be an assistant puppeteer, to either be an extra rod or an extra right hand. What kind of advice besides like don't do this do you have in terms of supporting your fellow performer as they do sort of the main performance and you're adding that extra life?
Right. It kind of takes really knowing who that character is again, because so much of us, what we do is character based. So you wouldn't, Elmo has this little thing he does. He kind of pats his hips when he's just standing around talking. So then you pay attention to these little idiosyncrasies that each character has, and Abby's got these really short arms. So if you have Abby and the wand, that wand is always ending up in her darn face. So you got to move it out. So you have to really pay attention to each character. And part of it is just physically, you have to have your hands on that character. But the most important thing you do is support the main performance. You are just there to make sure they look better. And you are there to support the performer. Should a performer have a freak out about something, your job is really just to support them and to keep them going. It is a really interesting support role. And there's some people who are terrible assistants and right hands because that's just not in their wheelhouse, right? They, understandably, a lot of us come from acting backgrounds, and in acting, I want to be seen. So being that support person is very difficult for them. Not that they can't do it, but it's just like it's not second nature. And for me, it's second nature. That is what I am if nothing else, a catalyst for people to be artists. And it's because I love artists. I love talent. I love when they perform. Nothing makes me happier than going to a show and seeing someone do a great job. It just makes me so happy. So in being able to help and support someone do that, it's a fantastic honor for me. I love being an assistant. There are a lot of times it's just really fun. Not that I don't love being a character, don't get me wrong, but I do love being an assistant.
Right. Well, and that certainly echoes what you said about being the artistic director at the O'Neill, of just making sure that other people have the platform and all the support that they need to make the art that they want to make.
Right.
It's really lovely.
And I do feel that we, with the O'Neill in that sense, I do feel a sense of legacy, that I was taught wonderful things by wonderful people. And I feel that it is my job to continue that tradition, that to make sure that this art form doesn't die, that this art form gets better and better as time goes on, and that younger people have the knowledge and the skills to continue doing what we're doing. And that's sort of all rolled into the O'Neill for me. Yeah. That is what it's about.
So one more question that I have about Sesame Street, and it's similar to a question that we asked Marty about Telly. We asked him, what did you, Pam, bring to that character? And he said, oh, and Pam does, or I do the right hand on Grundgetta. So what does Marty Robinson bring to Grundgetta when he right hands with you?
He's a pain in my ass. Grundgetta actually has a kind of small body, so yeah, it is a difficult thing because he has to curl around to get her to do it. I think you've tried her on once, right, Kim?
Yeah.
And so no, he's wonderful. He's lovely, supportive in doing it. What I do with Telly though is I'm literally at times half of his mind. Like I know what Marty's going to do before he does it very often. Like I will reach and he'll look and I'll reach before simultaneously, even though I didn't know he was going to do that look. Marty and I haven't had as much practice with that because I'm not on Grundgetta's on twice a year, maybe now. Yeah. With 26 shows that we do or 36 shows that we do 2 or 3 times a year I'm on. Telly used to be on almost every day. So I'm literally have hundreds of shows that I was assisting Marty. And a lot of times too, I think of funny stuff and I'll whisper in his ear, you should say, blah, blah, and that he can figure out to use it or not. That's sort of our relationship with that. But Grundgetta doesn't have that same sort of, occasionally he'll pass me a line or a word that she could use. But my stints have been very short and concentrated. I mean, I've had a few great shows, but overall it's always sort of supporting Oscar. So
great. And a terrific hit single too, that Grouch Girls Just Want to Have Fun is
yeah. My famous hit single.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty good. There is a song about canoeing on Swamp Mushy Muddy with Oscar. It's a love song that we sing going down in a rubber tire.
I've not heard that before, but we'll have to check that out and link it.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many shows when you think about it. It's like 4,000 shows or something. And of those 4,000, I've probably been in 2,500 at least. And that's quite amazing to think about. People ask me, well, do you remember when you did XYZ? And I'm like, absolutely not. I have no idea. A couple of things stand out, like when we would do inserts in the old days and Jim and Frank would come in to do it. It was just so much fun and so crazy and so weird. That was quite an honor to have been a part of all those things all those years ago.
Well, and it sometimes feel like a completely different show in a lot of ways because the people have changed, because the style and the content and everything, the formatting.
Well, here's the horrifying part. It used to be that Marty and I were the kids.
Right.
And now we're the oldest ones on the set. So, when we came in, we were the new guys. We were the kids. And it's like, wow, we've been here this long. To have now be the senior members of the team. So that's quite astonishing. And it is very different. I mean, Jim's brilliance, just that's the reason it's lasted this long, I'm sure. It was Jim's vision and how to do this stuff. Jim and John Stone, who was the original writer, founder of the whole thing, and Joan Gans Cooney in some ways. But really, the two of them creating this whole world that could continue is what it's about. And it's weird because you can't recreate that world necessarily. They're adjunct worlds that we're putting in, but it's not that same. Jim's sense of what puppets were was so interesting and so brilliant. It was fun to work with Jim too, because you could see his mind was always click, 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 click. He always had something going on, always thinking of the next thing, always thinking of the next show that was going to go on. And I remember we were, I think we're shooting a ZZ Top bit, and Jerry was singing the lead. And I think it was about the letter Z. And we had a downtime, a mic had gone down. And so we were waiting, and you kind of stand around a lot on TV when things go wrong, just kind of stand there and talk about stuff. And Jim took us aside and he had us all do these hand things. He says, okay, make your mouth like, make it like a mouth like this. Now put your hand on top and you come over. So about 8 of us stood around because we put our puppets down. We're doing this hand thing with him. He goes, okay, that's good. And then we finished the bit. Well, 5 years later, I think it's Labyrinth, where you see them falling down the well of hands.
Right.
And we had been practicing that on the set with him in between takes because he was thinking about it and how he wanted to use it. And that's kind of how Jim was all the time. There's always something. And I remember asking Jane Henson, where did his ideas come from? She said, you couldn't stop them. They just were always coming out of his mind. He always was thinking of something new and fun and different to do, which is really, it was weird. He was very, very much a genius to work around in that way.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I've been rewatching The West Wing, and there was a quote in that that the first lady says, and she's like, "Never date the geniuses because you'll never get any sleep."
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
sure. And it's interesting. I've been around a few geniuses, and they're all. It's their brains are different. It's the only thing I can think of. Just the way they click and move and constant.
mm-hmm.
And energy. Their energy is a little higher and different than what we do.
Right.
Well,
okay.
So for timeline sense, roughly when was that when it started going down to about like 26 episodes a season? Would you say roughly?
Probably 15 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
about 15 years ago. Okay.
12.
I was gonna say, I thought it was like after like 2002, 2003, that time.
Yeah.
Or so.
Yeah, so that would be the same.
Yeah.
That's 15.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it. Cool. So did that kind of open up you to being able to focus more on the O'Neill and some of your other
Right.
ambitions and stuff? Then?
Yeah, what happened was, I mean, let's face it, Sesame has been a fabulous job for me my whole life. When we did do 110 shows, I didn't do anything else. I had children. So that those, the 6 months off, the 7 months off, I would just take them off and not do anything else but raise my 2 kids. Mm-hmm. And then I would go back to work and I'd bring my nanny and, we'd do all that stuff. So for those years, it was perfect for me. And then as my children grew and there was more and more interesting work to be done in my brain, it's given me this wonderful opportunity to do lots of things. I like teaching. I teach at the University of Hawaii. I just got done teaching at the Taipei National. I have to remember the exact because it's Taipei National University of the Arts. And it was a lovely experience there. I've taught at the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts. I've taught in, UC Fresno. I've taught all over the place. And it's also allowed me to go and see a lot of international work all over the world and be supportive of many of the forms of puppetry that's out there. Because there's so many things that are not Muppets. And don't get me wrong, I love them more than life itself. They're what I do without even thinking, and it comes instinctively for me. But all these other forms that are so beautiful and so great. And it allows me to direct different things, live shows and, you know, smaller puppet venues. And like Between the Lions, when I took that on, that allowed me, because we were only doing 26 or 36 shows, then I could go and do another 36 shows somewhere else during the summer. When we do Between the Lions, either in New York or in Mississippi, I'd go away and do that. That was very nice. And then we did, it always allowed me to do another show.
Right.
The nice thing about Sesame, it's never been exclusive because they really can't afford to pay us exclusively. You know, it's very, very expensive to take everyone's time for a whole year. We used to sign contracts that said you can't do anything that's in competition, but that's almost impossible to just, you know, to enforce or even figure out what that is. What is competition, right? What is the competition for that? Is it any puppet? You know, so that kind of went by the wayside.
Just no purple dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no purple dinosaurs. No purple dinosaurs. That was really sad. It was the Barneyizing of children's television was just horrifying.
But that did open up some doors for you guys to be able to do some other, I mean, really wonderful projects. I think of the mid 90s of Eureka's Castle,
Right.
and Allegra's Window, some of those projects, and you mentioned already Between the Lions, which I'm sure gave you, probably allowed you the license to really create some original characters that you weren't able to, even if you were picking up a character like Grundgetta or for Marty, a Telly,
Right. Yeah.
you know, to be able to really start from the beginning.
Right.
What were some of your favorite characters that you were able to create during that time?
Well, Leona was, although I picked up Leona from Kathy Mullen. Now there was
that's right.
Like Kathy Mullen did her first, but Leona was just so much fun. She was the 4-year-old in me. And she just would do all this weird stuff, which I used to do when I was 4. It was just so much fun and a lovely crew to work with. I mean, I kind of have been very fortunate that these have been my buddies. It's been Jim Krupa and Marty Robinson and you know, Heather Ash and just we've been such a tight group going through doing all of these interesting shows. I did love doing Lindy on Allegra's Window, who was just, I played a lot of dogs and cats for some reason. It was just, Lindy was just, she was really fun. She was a dancer and just adored dancing, which was another part of my whole life. Eureka's Castle, the Moat Monsters were really great. And I love being with Brian Meal as my partner. Brian is a lovely performer. And when he decided not to perform anymore, I really was quite heartbroken. But he's written some great books. If you want to read really fun books, Brian has become a great writer, and that's what he wanted to do. And then I truly love Emma, the fat mouse that I did on Eureka's Castle, because yum, food! I would just run through and eat all the food I could possibly eat. You know, it was one of those. And she was just a blast. I sang, yummy, 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 I got food in my tummy and I feel like eating more. Yum! I mean, that was her theme song, right? So she was just a blast. And she was a little rod puppet, of course, that Jim Krupa built and tortured me with in the manipulation because it was so tricky. And if I get it wrong, he'd go, but fun, really fun. Being tortured. And then, in fact, the show I first started with, The Great Space Coaster, with Kevin Clash, we played these parallel characters, and he was doing Garriddle, and I actually played 2 characters. I played Fluffy and Puffy to his middle character, which was Scruffy. And so at that time, I played both characters simultaneously with 2 hands, and they would literally write me 5 pages of dialogue with myself. Just go, guys, you know that I'm talking to myself here for 5 pages. Until I got them to stop doing that. At least put Scruffy's lines in between. I mean, you got a 3rd character, break them up. But really fun. It's always been a joy to kind of find these. And characters, you know, they sort of, I like to think they just kind of come through you, like you find them and suddenly they become this whole thing that you had no idea. It's not a real conscious thing. There's certain conscious things that you put into a character, but a lot of it is just like, I don't know, they're out there in the ether, and then they step in and they become and do things that I would never be brave enough to do sometimes. So that the joy of having Sesame Street has been that it has the recognition, right? Everybody knows Sesame Street. You walk in and say, so it has a lot of clout, but it allows you to do these other shows, these smaller shows, these more off the wall, oddball things. And then people say, oh, it must be kind of okay, she's on Sesame Street, right? Whereas if I was just a person saying, I'm going to do the show called Allegra's Window about singing, they just go, yeah, okay, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Show me what you do, you know, and that's kind of been the gift of Sesame Street on so many levels. Like I said, it's been a real gift. Although my first house was bought from Space Coaster.
No kidding.
Yeah, well, it's down payment I got.
Well, sure. Yeah.
You know, Space Coaster was sort of a big deal. And at that time, actually, I was floundering around, like I said, after graduate school. I got Marty brought me in. I had helped Marty after that audition. I helped Marty like build leaves and stuff for this play he was doing off Broadway. So he said, I need help building these leaves for Little Shop of Horrors if you want to come down. So I would come down during graduate school and help him build a few things and do a few things. So when the show went to London and I had graduated from graduate school, he said, do you want to come in second crew to Little Shop? And I said, yeah. So I went into Little Shop and I met Anthony Asbury there. He was playing the plant at the time. And I was like the second puppeteer on the show, so I did everything. So like I did little plants that sing, and I had to do the wigs because it was like nothing. It was a very small show. I had to dress the dentist for his quick changes, and and then the big finale at the end, you carry all those faces in the plants, and sing. And so as I was doing that, I got Great Space Coaster. So then for about a month, I was doing Great Space Coaster television during the day and Little Shop at night. And I was getting no sleep in between, because when you come home from performing a show, you don't go to bed at midnight because you're like this, right?
Yeah,
so it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but you got to get up for a 7 o'clock call. So that was a pretty interesting time of my life. Very fun. I would never trade it, but it was sort of like, okay, I can't do this much longer. And then I had to quit Little Shop because it was paying me $150 a week. Big money. Yeah. Even back then, that was not big money.
Wow.
That was basically my cab fares home at 11:45 at night. Because in those days, in the 80s, you didn't want to take the subway for sure after 10 o'clock at night. So it was literally, that was the job I paid for part of it. So that was quite exciting. And then I got Sesame at the end of Space Coaster. Sesame came in.
Gotcha. Have you been able to do much more live performance in your time?
Well, yeah, I do. I do a fair amount of live performing. I usually do. It's a lot of outreach shows that we do.
Yeah.
Like we take the characters from Sesame and go and do something, or we take, like we did a lot of, after Hurricane Katrina, we did a lot of outreach in the South there, because for one thing, we were shooting Between the Lions in Mississippi. So Katrina hit, and we started up shooting 2 weeks after Katrina hit. Again, we had been there for a while, for several years. So this was coming back for like a 8th season or something. And so Lisa Simon, our darling Lisa Simon, who was a director and a wonderful person, organized these tours. The first one, we went out, I think 5 weeks after Katrina hit, and went to visit the devastated areas, and it was horrible. Yeah. And the schools had just opened, and we went in to say hello to the kids and did a little song and dance show for the kids. And the teachers were crying in the back. And so we'd go back and talk to the teachers and said, this is the first time we've seen the kids smile in 6 weeks.
Mm.
You know, thank you so much for coming. So we did a lot. We did 3 tours for Katrina, and that was a spectacular live outreach kind of thing that you remember why you do it. You know that.
Yeah.
And this past weekend, I just did this Chinese Lunar New Year show for the Metropolitan Opera with Alan and Leslie Carrara and Alan Maroka and Leslie Carrara. And then again, you remember why you did it. There are these darling, tiny 2-year-old kids all dressed up and just cheering and loving everything that you're doing. It's very fun. And then I direct, like I said, these outside the Trilobite show. I'm doing some of that. I directed a couple of some movie shorts and different things like that. My time is so it's getting so wound up in all of these smaller projects that I do. I try to help develop some future shows, television wise as well. And then I'm on the Jim Henson board, foundation board. So that takes a little bit of time. We go over, I think the starting grant number was like 160 grants that we read, and we whittle it down and try and give money to people to develop shows. And so the other part of that is that if we are granting them, I want to see them. So I see a lot of shows, so I know what we're giving the money away to. And again, that's part of the O'Neill thing, kind of, it all sort of rolls together. And we do have a residency between the O'Neill and the Jim Henson Foundation, which is a really wonderful thing. If you have a project you want to apply for, you really should do it. It's up to 4 weeks at the O'Neill is paid for with a $5,000 stipend to get your people there and do it. And that's room, board, and time at the O'Neill, the facilities.
That's fantastic.
So that's a really great thing. Cheryl has been just wonderful in support of Puppeteers, as Jane was. I mean, a lot of the O'Neill was started by Jane Henson and a group of them. So it really, it's my heart project that I just keep, pushing it on forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad we brought it back here, because I know we talked about what this year is going to look like, but we'd love to kind of end with your involvement with the O'Neill. We know you were at the very first one back in 91, but it's certainly evolved in all sorts of ways since then. When did you become artistic director? I know it was handed over from Richard.
It was 12. It was the 12th year of the O'Neill, so 91 plus 12 would be 2002, 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been artistic director longer. Actually, George Latshaw was the original artistic director for 2 years, and Richard took over from him after that. I was involved. There were a few years, now I had small children at the time. In 91, when I taught that thing, my son was a year old. And I was running back and forth from my home, which was then in Storrs, Connecticut, which was an hour away between O'Neill and doing that. So the next few years, I would only, next couple of years, I think I only showed up to the shows, was all I could handle. And then I want to say it's year 6 or 7, I started coming back and doing the emerging artists. So I was director of the emerging artists for about 5 years there, 5 or 6 years with Richard as artistic director. And then we just switched positions, basically. Richard was getting more into photography, and it became more of a burden for him to be. O'Neill takes a lot of time all year. And that's one of the nice things about my job, is that I do have that time in the off, to go to fundraisers, to figure out how to keep the O'Neill going. I teach occasionally at the O'Neill as well. During the NTI season, I'll teach a puppetry course. So there was a lot more freedom to do that. So at that point, the O'Neill was strictly, I want to say 7 days, and I don't think it was more than 30 people. So I have, including staff. So it was a much smaller event. There were maybe 2 guest artists. That was it. No other of our participant projects or alternative stuff. So Richard asked me, Richard and Bart and Bobby said they thought I should take it over. And so we discussed it quite a bit. And they thought I should try and take it 2 weeks. And I said, no way, I can never take it to 2 weeks. How would I ever do that? How did it? So sure enough, after a couple of years, I said, well, I guess we could have a pre-conference. So I just continued to expand it. 2 weeks is our maximum that we'll do. And now we do, some pre-conference events are 5 days. And my goal was, again, always pushing that more European in feel and just expanding the view of what the art of puppetry is. And the O'Neill has been incredibly supportive. Preston Whiteway as the director, and now I went through a bunch of executive directors of the O'Neill, and it was tough because some of them really didn't get puppetry or care that puppetry was attached necessarily. Preston totally gets it, totally appreciates what we do, and really supports us. So that's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful movement forward, and understanding that we want it to be more international than just national, even though it's the National Puppetry Conference. I really want the international feel, just because it promotes growth for all of us puppeteers in this country to see that the differences.
Certainly. Well, yeah, and it's always a difficult thing to describe to people of what the conference is. They want to put it into, it's just a conference like a business conference, or it's like going doing a 2-week stint at a college or whatever. It's like, no, it's this singular experience. And I didn't realize how much it had grown in terms of guest artists and stuff under your reign. So I mean, that must be again a pleasure to see how that's evolved.
Yes, it is. It is wonderful to see how it's evolved, and it is a very hard thing to describe to people. When I mean, you guys both know, you've been there. I say, just come. I think it is our Shangri-La. It's our Brigadoon. It is there for 2 weeks, and even when I go back after the 2 weeks and go to the O'Neill, it's like, what is this place? This is not my place, because it is so different. And I work very hard to make sure that the groups and the energies and the people who come all get what we're doing as much as possible. And that is, going through the applications is literally a couple of week process for me. We get as much as 150 applications. And how complicated the applications are. Well, I read every single one of them. I know everything that people are wanting to do. So it takes time. And I know walking in, I kind of haven't, if I don't know you, like I know you guys, so that's not as hard a thing. But if you are walking in as a new person, pretty much I know everything you've sent me. I understand who you are. And that's one of the things that, as there's a feeling there, community, creating that puppet community, that support is so vital to me. Because as puppeteers, we do tend to work alone. We do tend to create our little worlds with maybe one other person. So to have a group of people and have them really committed to what we're doing and really understanding, and then to have the lovely luxury of not worrying about your food and not worrying about where you're going to sleep and just doing puppets is really, that's the key for me. And then it's beautiful, right? It's a beautiful, you never get to appreciate it much, but it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. You get to go to the beach one day at the end, maybe. Maybe.
Do you have any advice for people on doing applications for whether it's the O'Neill or even for grants? Because even though the directions are all there, it's kind of answering the questions. But any kind of application is always kind of stressful. You're always thinking like, okay, what do they want to hear in a certain way?
What are they looking for?
Yeah, what are they? Yeah, people think, what are they looking for? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, with the O'Neill, I'm just really looking for you to be real and tell me why you're doing this and what you really want out of this. So then I understand that I can give you that. And if I understand I can't give you that, then maybe I'm not going to have you come. Because there are things that people are looking for that are not necessarily what the O'Neill is offering. That's one reason our application is as dense as it is. And really, honestly, just answer the truth about who you are and what you are. That's what I am looking for. And I think that's generally what everybody's looking for. You don't have to make up anything more than who you are and what you are. I would only say that if you are going for the Henson grants, always make sure the visuals are good. Always make sure that what you're presenting in the other kind of grants, just make sure it's a pretty picture or what you're doing, And you don't have to be hugely wordy. Be succinct. Because again, with grants, if you're turning in a grant and someone like me has looked at 150 grants, you think I want to read another 22-page diatribe about your show? No, tell me what your show is. Tell me what your idea is. Tell me what you want to do. It's much easier for me then to make an accurate judgment of what's going on. Yeah. And the same is true with the applications.
Well, even about do you like anecdotal examples? 'Cause I can imagine you see a lot of applications that, oh, I always loved doing puppetry. I grew up doing puppetry, things like that. Is there any cliche things that people maybe should try to stay away from, or try to make it more personal, I guess?
Yes, I think always make it more personal. Yeah. I mean, there aren't a lot of people who say I grew up doing puppetry. Most people find puppetry somewhere along the way. Yeah. And that's always interesting. You talk to any puppeteer, we all come from such different places to the art form. So that's good. I mean, and the truth is you don't need to do a snow job on us, because we know puppeteers. You can say, I don't know, I just found puppetry. It's really weird. I really like it. I don't know what it's going to be. Can you help me figure out what this is? And I'm going to go, yes, come. But if you don't have to say, I studied puppetry with da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da for 15 years, and then I studied there, and I've done 422 performances of, yeah, that's great. But tell me why this matters to you. And then I'm much more interested, It's kind of, the reality is we're all much more interested in the truth of what you're doing. Yeah.
I think most people are used to filling out job applications where you kind of do want to talk like that in a way, Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're puffing up your resume to make it look as good as you can.
Yeah.
This isn't a job. This is about, for me, this is about you creating art.
Yeah. It's not what you're trying to do here. Yeah.
Yeah. And plus that, I think we do ask for your resume anyway on a sort of separate deal.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to give me that resume. You have to, in the part that's written, it's really about what do you want? Who are you? What are you doing here? What do you want to say? How can I help you say that? Which is also why the O'Neill's unusual, I think, because we're not looking for people whose ego is about being a puppeteer. We're looking for people who want to be puppeteers because the art form is important. And it always gets back to that Nikki Tillwell quote, which is, love the art in yourself, not yourself in the art, right? Because it's very easy to say, well, I'm a puppeteer and I make this much money and aren't I wonderful? No, I don't care about that. I want to know who you are, what you want to say, and why you're using a dolly. I mean, because I know why I do it, but why are you doing that? That's really, really important to me.
Well, that's a great note to kind of start wrapping things up on, but we can't have you leave without sort of joining us around the fire and giving us your best puppeteer story in the vein of Jim Krupa.
The vein of Jim Krupa? Well,
it doesn't have to be about him, but just an event where things went wrong, but now you could look back and enjoy. I'll laugh about.
Lots of things go wrong all the time. Auditions were probably hard, but I have a great audition story. It was my final audition for Sesame Street, and the Sesame Street audition started with about 300 people, and it was 4 months long. And every week you would go, and there'd be less people. And they didn't tell you at the end of the audition what happened. You just were called back the next day, or you weren't. So every week you'd go and you go home and you go, oh my God, I wonder if they're going to call me back. And sure enough, they called me back. So we went from 300 people to basically 2, me and Camille Bonara, who eventually got on the show as well. And I am walking to this audition, and I'm really nervous, and I'm not feeling good, and I'm having a bad hair day, and I can't think, and I'm thinking this is the end. I'm going to be never going to be hired. And I'm walking, and I'm nervous, and I'm kind of down and looking, and this homeless man looks up at me and says, "Hey, Miss Piggy, you lose your hairbrush?"
Oh my God. Wow.
Get your hairbrush, Miss Piggy. What are you doing? I just went, okay, it's a sign. He already knows I'm going to be a puppeteer.
That's
I
right.
have that hair. Okay, that's just what it is. But that last audition, it was John Stone, Dulcie Singer, Lisa Simon, and Jim Henson in the room. And you walk in and you just go, holy shit. Oh my God, look who's here. Because before it'd been like Jane Henson would work us out, and Richard Hunt and Jerry Nelson came, all the other puppeteers, but Jim basically had not done anything with us. And so I walk in and I do the audition, and I know Camille's the only other person out there. So you're just going, oh my God. And as I was leaving, I shut the door, and then Dulcie Singer, who was the executive producer, wonderful woman, came out. She's still around. She was just fantastic. And she comes out and she goes, well, that was very good. And I said, thank you. And she said, okay, so I guess we'll see you in September. And I went, what? Because, yeah, I think we'd like you to try it. September, someone will contact you on the dates. What's it? I was like, I think I got the job. I don't know. But then I realized leaving, I got the job. I looked for the homeless man, did not find him. Said, yes, Miss Piggy's having a bad hair day.
But we're going to fix that. I've got Muppet money now.
Yeah, I got real money now. $4.
Yeah. And compared to Grundgetta, it might have been a good hair day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, little did he know. Yeah.
Yeah. It was for Grundgetta. It was absolutely 100% for Grundgetta. That's what they were looking for, because everybody else was covering everything else. Marty had taken Kelly at that point, and Kevin was doing, Nobel Prize and a couple of the other things. So it was funny. It was fun.
Wow. You got your Edith Bunker.
I got my Edith Bunker.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to follow the work that you're doing and other projects that may come out?
I don't know. I guess I should start doing something. Facebook is fine. I let everybody. I don't know. I don't do that. I'm not a good social. You guys have to help me. People tell me I should have a website. I probably will be doing that sometime soon. I don't know.
Start off with an Instagram.
Yeah, I do have Instagram, so I'll do it.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram or Twitter. I do have Twitter as well.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Pam Arciero.
I'll set you up with a good graphic designer for the website.
Oh, that would be nice. Very nice.
That's right.
Very nice. So this has been lovely, you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And anytime you want to join us back, we're happy to have you on Puppet Tears.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It might be fun to do a little follow-up after the O'Neill, possibly.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great. That'd be really great.
Awesome.
And because I'm really curious as to how this is going to turn out. This is a very exciting year in that way.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Pam.